Welcome everybody, my name is Tim Burris, and today I want to talk about a utility that I recently created that will help you get data from your Excel documents into SQL Server. If you've used SQL Server Management Studio to get data from Excel into SQL Server, you'll find that it's pretty powerful, but there's a ton of things that I find wrong with it. I run into problems with it all the time. Either the driver's not installed or it tries to infer data types, and when there's an anomaly, it freaks out, or it tries to guess how long the strings are going to be, and then it gets that wrong, and then it truncates them without telling you, and a whole bunch of things. Not here to bash the import process for Management Studio. It's super powerful, provides a lot of options, but for years I've been thinking I just want a simple utility that'll get the data from Excel and put it into SQL Server, and then I can be done with it and I can move on and start transforming that data and getting it into the real tables that it needs to go into. Because I don't use the import process to get it into a finished table. I use the import process to get it into a table that I can then write queries against, analyze the data, validate the data, and then move the data where it needs to go. And typically, I would think that these issues are just me, something that I'm just doing wrong, and everyone else gets data into their SQL Server database without issue. But I do know some other people that run into the same issues. In fact, a good friend of mine and a colleague runs into the same exact problems. We speak about it all the time. I actually forgot to ask his permission before I used his name in this demonstration. So let's just say his name is probably not Jeff. I know that not Jeff runs into the same exact kind of issues. We talked about them this week. And once I got this utility finished, I sent it over to him, and he used it to bring in one of his very complex sheets with a bunch of formulas and references to other worksheets and things like that. So big shout out to not Jeff for running this utility through the ringer, and giving it a real test before I went live with the video. With that, let's get to it. I'm going to pull up an Excel workbook that I received last week that I needed to import into a database and match it up to some existing data. Unfortunately, the actual workbook had a bunch of sensitive information, client information, so I had to just kind of create this demo version of it. It has all the same concepts of what I needed to do, but all the data's been scrubbed and it's been trimmed down a little bit so that it's kind of appropriate for this demo. But so I have this workbook, and it has 4 worksheets. This one has 4. The one that I got from the client had roughly 85 worksheets in it. And in this particular situation, I need to bring in all of these worksheets, and I actually want to bring them into the same table because each of these worksheets are tied to a client. So Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, Delta are parent records, and I want to bring in all these data elements, and I want to be able to match them back up to Alpha, to Charlie, and to Delta. So they have the same structure across each of the worksheets. Each one of them has their header rows starting on line 2. They have some contact information up top, which doesn't need to be brought in. So what I wanted to be able to do with this utility is very simply have it point to this file and say, I want you to bring in all of these worksheets, and I want you to put them all in one table. And then I don't want you to try to figure out data types. Just bring it all as invar max, bring in all the columns, and then I can handle the rest from SQL Server. But as you would expect from an Excel workbook that gets emailed around through the office, there are inconsistencies in this workbook. So it looks on the surface like, oh, everything is beautiful and uniformed. But if we look at the Alpha tab, we'll see that they call the account number account space pound, and then they just called it account, and here it's account underscore number, and here it's account with a carriage return line feed number. So I did not expect this utility to solve all of these problems, but I did think that it could help with some of them. And so what we're going to find as I run this utility, it's going to bring in all of these. It's going to create columns for each of these, but what it's going to do is it's going to strip out all the characters that are not A through Z and 0 through 9, which is an option which we'll point out. But in doing that, it's going to let us match up account carriage return number with account with account underscore number, and those will match. But I don't expect it to find and know that that also is the same as account, and that. But I do expect that account and account space pound sign would match up, because again, if we strip out all the special characters, all the non A through Z, 0 through 9, then that'll help us be sure that we're matching up columns. We could use index, but that changes too. People move the columns around, so I'm probably getting way down into the weeds, and let's just show the utility do its thing. So I'm going to close this workbook. I'm going to go to where I have my executable, which is there on GitHub. I'm going to run it. First thing it's going to do is ask me where is my file. Now, I could have passed it in, as a command line parameter. I'm not going to get into all that, but since I just ran it outright, it's going to ask me where my file is. So I am just going to take my Excel file. I'm going to drop it in here. So now I'll just run it, and it's going to do its thing. So it's going to parse the file, and it's going to insert into the database. And at the end, we're going to get kind of an overall, what happened. We can review all the logs, everything that it did, but not important. What we really want to see is that we did have one warning, which was that in worksheet delta, the 6th column didn't have a column name. So I'm curious about that. We're going to open this guy back up real quick. And so delta 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There shouldn't be. This is interesting. So what we have is we have this notes column, and this is what happens. And it looked like these guys were notes here, but these were actually in a separate column. These were in column F, not part of the notes. And this is what happens when users are typing in data. So it actually brought in these columns, and it told me that column F has data in it. These two, maybe 3 records, yeah. These 3 records had data in it, but it didn't have a name, which is fine. It'll actually still bring the data in, but it did just warn that it looks like it's a column that doesn't have a header, which is cool. That's fine. And that was the only warning. So we'll switch over to the database and just real quick see what that looks like when it was brought in. We'll refresh. We should see, we'll talk about where we get this table name from in just a moment, but this temp Excel import is where I have it configured to bring the data in right now. And so when I expand this guy out, I'm going to see a unique identifier. This is something that the utility is putting on each record just so you'll have an ID, in case you have rows that are pretty much identical. It'll include the worksheet name, so Alpha Bravo Charlie Delta, and then each of the fields, and we'll see vendor, method. These were all on the as headers, phone, and then we have account. Remember, we had account, and then we had account space pound. Those were consolidated into account because after removing all the special characters, they were the same. We have notes, and we have account number, and we had account underscore number, and we had account carriage return line feed number. But again, stripping out all those characters means we just get account number. It does mean we have 2 account fields, but this is expected. When you bring data in from Excel, I don't expect this process to do all of my business logic and solve all of my problems. I just want to get it into SQL Server. And then here's the column that I actually wasn't expecting, which was column 6, and that's because it had some data in it that didn't have a header. So if I drill into this, we can see all the, let me move this guy down. We can see all those data elements that we had in the file, and we can see that they are broken down by the worksheet that they were on. So Alpha, Bravo, Charlie, and Delta. Again, these GUIDs just so that we'll have a unique identifier in case we want to analyze, query, delete, what have you, if we have identical rows. And yeah, over in column 6, the one that I didn't expect here, we received these three values. And so what I would do is, I'd run this import, and then I would evaluate this. I'd see, column 6. And then when I go to merge this into real data or import it, then I would just, I would take and concatenate notes with column 6 or whatever, and move on. So this is exactly what I want out of the utility, is for it to just simply put the data into SQL Server for me. Again, everything comes in as an invar max. It is not going to try to infer the data types. It is not going to try to guess how long it is. It's just going to bring in exactly what you have. So it did that perfectly. But of course, that was just running it after I had already configured it. So what can we configure with this utility? Well, aside from passing in the Excel document as a command line parameter, everything else here is configured in the appsettings.json. So if we open this guy up, we'll see a few different sections here. So one of them are our settings regarding parsing the data from the Excel document, and then the other is the settings related to sending it to SQL Server. So I did put comments in here. So this is a JSON C supported document. So if you're not familiar with JSON C, standard by Microsoft, which does mean you can include comments in your JSON, and typically this is what you'll see in an app settings JSON. But for all the purists out there, yes, this is not pure JSON, but it does conform to JSON C. So I did document each of the properties. Probably don't need to go through all of them, but I'll just run through them anyway, I guess. Skipping blank rows. Yeah, if the row is completely empty, you might want to skip it, but you can turn it off. Skipping blank columns. And this would not be if the header is blank. This would be as if every single thing, every cell of the column is empty, then it would just skip it and not bring it in. Is the first row the header? If you turn that off, that means that it's not going to try to get the column names at all, and it'll just name each one of them column 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and so on. But for our situation, I wanted to go ahead and name them based on what the first row had. Skip hidden worksheets. So I don't know if you guys encounter this, but all the time I have worksheets that I get, and they have hidden worksheets that have lookup fields or either hidden accounting or who knows what. Typically I need to skip those, but if you wanted to have the hidden worksheets processed, you can do that. All worksheets, this would just say, I want you to get all the worksheets. Otherwise, if you say false, it's only going to get the first one. Old school Excel, when you would create a document, it would always have sheet 1, 2, and 3, and people would only put data in sheet 1, and then, you'd have 2 empty sheets. So, if you're dealing with that kind of workbook, you could just turn that to false, and it'd only get the first worksheet. The next property is one that I've talked about a couple of times, which is that it's going to take the headers and strip out everything except for A through Z and 0 through 9 when it creates the column name. That does a couple of things. One, it makes it safe for SQL Server. And two, it helps match records up a little bit easier across worksheets if you're bringing them into the same table. Trim white space. So this would mean, when we read a cell value, it'll remove any white spaces at the beginning or the end. If you're C sharper, it's just .trim. Not doing anything magical, just .trim on the string. Exclude sheets. So maybe you have, like I did, you have 85 worksheets that need to come in, but they did have one worksheet, like sheet 28, some random sheet that I did not want to bring in. So here you could just define any sheets that you don't want to be processed, and it's an array, so just go ahead and fill it out. Have any of those skipped. Same thing for limit to only. So maybe you have a lot of sheets, but you're only looking for 3 of them. You could put those in here. It would only include those. And last but not least, typically you want to start at row 1. That's kind of the default. This is 1 based, so that it matches up what you see in Excel, so when you're trying to debug. But normally that would be the case, but if you remember this Excel document that I'm using, the first row actually has this contact information on it. So I'm starting at row 2 for all of mine. So that's that setting, and that's it for the settings regarding parsing the file. And then when it comes to SQL Server, writing the data, obviously a connection string, the database schema you're going to write to, the database table you're going to write to, and whether or not you want to drop the table. So this will not append. This utility is not going to append rows to an existing table. So if the table exists, then you're going to get an error and it's going to bail. So if you, but this is sort of a safeguard if you're concerned about, possibly losing data. Maybe you want to have this false and make sure that you delete the table yourself. But have it true if you want to drop the table before running the import. Now, when it comes to the table name, this is how I managed to bring in all the worksheets in as one table, because I just gave it this table name. If you wanted each worksheet to come in as its own table, we could add worksheet name here in braces and actually put this in the comment here so that you can see that you can do this. And this is really the only special string replacement that I have. anywhere in the utility. So you can put worksheet name in here. I mean, you could put it wherever you wanted. I mean, you could make this string just worksheet name, and then it would just create a table called alpha bravo. I'm just going to put it right here. So I'm going to have temp Excel import with worksheet name. I'm going to save these changes, which I changed the starting row too. So let me put this back. I'm going to, so now I'm going to run it, and now we should expect all those worksheets to come in as their own table. Because, for me, for this one case that, that I specifically wrote this for, I needed to bring them all in. But as I was talking with Not Jeff through the week, 90% of his situations are that each workbook contains an entirely different structure of unrelated data, or at least not the same types of records. So he typically needs to bring them in as different worksheets. So I've changed that setting. I'm going to come back. I'm going to run this guy again. Alrighty, I will choose my file, same file, run it. It's going to do its thing. Good, we still expect that same warning. But now when we look in the database, come up here and refresh, and we will see this table was there already, so that's still there. But then what we got were temp Excel import alpha, bravo, Charlie, and delta. And then, of course, only the columns for each that were in each worksheet are going to be here. So we're not going to see column 6 in this in the alpha one, because it wasn't there. I mean, again, this is not doing magic where it's trying to figure out what are all the possible fields. It's just looking through, finding the unique columns for the table and inserting them in. So I believe, I forget which workbook had column 6. Probably this guy. Yep, sure enough. So here we have account number, and here we have account. And that's what the tool does. It just is supposed to be a simple way that you can get your data from Excel into SQL Server. You could schedule this maybe. It does run a command line. Oh, one other property, I guess, is this stay open true. I did think about the situations where I might want to schedule this to run in the background. So what it does with true, when it finishes running, you're going to get this press any key to exit. And this is really just so that you can see all of the all the information messages, how many records are brought in, errors and warnings, and all that. But if you turn that off, then when it runs, it'll just go away. And I'm using Serialog. If you've checked any of my other videos, you'll know that I take logging very serious. So everything that happens in the utility pretty much gets logged. And here's where it's being logged to. I log it to my Seek instance. If you're not familiar with Seek, you should check out Seek and structured logging. I also write it to the console, which is why you see it on the screen, and I also write it to a file. So if you go to your program data folder like this, then you would expect to find all this information also in that file. So if you turn the true off, the stay open, whenever it disappears, it's not like you can't find out what happened. You simply pull up one of the other sources and check out the logs. And so that's also useful if you decide you're going to schedule this utility to maybe run from process a network drive Excel document every night, and then maybe you have a stored procedure schedule that's going to go through and process that each night. But that's really getting ahead. Purpose of this, just get the data into SQL Server, and then you can write your own transforms to move that data around. I do hope to expand on this. I already have plenty of other ideas that I'd like to see out of this. One day, maybe a user interface, but I don't want to put too much time into making some finished product out of it that's unwieldy and a million options and it's difficult to use. So for now, just a simple command line. Come in here into your app settings, set up what you want, run it, and go. I hope that at least one of you guys out there find this useful and can use this utility. I'm always looking for ways to improve. So if you have some ideas, just ping me. But in closing, definitely shout out to Not Jeff for his communication this week as we tried to figure out what would be the minimum viable set of features here. What's the minimum we could do and make this utility useful? So appreciate that, Not Jeff. Rest of you guys, thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful day.